Tonight I would like to begin with a little demonstration of how difficult things can be when they appear very easy. Okay? Sometimes things look very easy, but they do not turn out to be quite so easy. We would normally expect that the events of chapter 10 would be a sequel to chapter 9 and a prelude to chapter 11, right? In other words, it would be sort of continuous. You would go from one to the other. I said 10, but I want you to look at 9:1. In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus of Median descent, who was made king over the kingdom of the Chaldeans. Now that's the first year of Darius. If you look at chapter 10, you are in the third year of Cyrus, the king of Persia. Okay, see the difference between the two? One is Darius, and the other is Cyrus. Now back on to chapter 11, verse 1. In the first year of Darius the Mede, I arose to be an encouragement to him. Now, if you will look at this little chart that's in the middle of your booklet, it's page 15. If you look at the chart in the middle of the book, you will see that Cyrus began his reign in 539. Cyrus is at the end of the Babylonian section. If you look start at the left and you go to where the line drops off, then go on the next line, and where that line would drop off is Cyrus. See his name on the drop line? Okay? Cyrus was about 539 to 522. Now, that next line down where it says Persia, if you drop along that line to Darius, you'll see Darius 521 to 485. Chapter 9 is in that place. Chapter 10 is back with Cyrus. Chapter 11 is back with Darius. What happens to the chronology? The problem comes in when you look at 11:1, it is a continuation of 10. Now let's complicate it a little bit more. Look at the 10th chapter. Look at the 10th chapter. I don't know exactly how to resolve this puzzle. I'm sure there's a simple resolution. I just have not found it. I am not in any way questioning the book of Daniel. I'm just pointing out to you that sometimes we need to acknowledge that there are, even within the Word of God, riddles that we don't have all the answers for, and this is one of them. In verse 1, in the third year of Cyrus, the king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel. Now, remember, this is about 536 BC. The chapter before occurred in about, let's see, what would that be? 522 BC. The next chapter is about 522 BC. So, you've got this problem with this time. All right? He says a message was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belshazzar, and the message was true and one of great conflict. Now, the word conflict could perhaps better be translated with the word tribulation. A message of great tribulation, great trouble. All right? But he understood the message, and he had an understanding of the vision. In those days, I, Daniel, had been mourning for 3 entire weeks. I did not eat any tasty food, nor did eat meat or wine enter into my mouth, nor did I use any ointment, that is, no perfume, no special anointings, until the entire 3 weeks were completed. On the 24th day of the first month, while I was on the bank of the great river, that is the Tigris, the Hiddekel, I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, there was a certain man dressed in linen. How many days have elapsed entirely in Daniel 10? 3 weeks, 21 days that ended on the 24th day, right, Jim? Ended on the 24th day, all right? You have a lapse of 3 weeks. Now the angel begins to answer him, and the angel's speech is like it's one long continuous speech. It goes right into chapter 11. Look at the beginning of chapter 11. It just carries on from 10. Probably we ought to read the last verse of chapter 10. However, I will tell you what is inscribed in the writing of truth. Yet there is no one who stands firmly with me against these forces except Michael, your prince. And in the first year of Darius the Mede, I arose to be an encouragement and a protection for him. See, the angel just keeps on going. There's no break. There's no indication of a time lapse between the two. However, what happened to the other 15 years? There's 15 years difference. But it's only 15 days or 21 days in Daniel 10. Something's happened to the time. Now, how do we explain that? There are a lot of different explanations that are given. Maybe Daniel 10 is an insertion, and you should go from the end of chapter 9 to the beginning of chapter 11. End of chapter 9 to beginning of 11. Just pretend 10 isn't in there, like it's a great big parenthesis. And you know something? It reads beautifully that way too. Now, that way the chronology fits. But the speech is interrupted. If the speech fits, the chronology is off. You see the problem? I don't know how to solve it. And I have not read a single commentator that knows how to solve it. To me, it's not something that says to me, this can't be God's word or it's historically inaccurate. There's a key missing someplace that we don't know. When we find that key, we will answer the historic problem without any question. Just as there was a historic problem in the minds of non-biblicists because of Belshazzar's feast. They no longer laugh at it. Not since the finding of those tablets, not since the discovering of the writings of Herodotus. They do not accept Daniel, but they do accept Herodotus. They do not accept Daniel, but they accept Cyrus. Daniel is suspect because he claims to be a prophet, speaking for God. And that makes him immediately suspect. We had a rather unfortunate incident happen at the college while I was there. It became necessary to dismiss a student from school for continuously deciding that the rules of he did not belong together and openly sort of ridiculing things because he wasn't stepped on. And when he got stepped on, then he got mad because he got stepped on, so it had to be handled. And one of the students read a little quote from Charles Swindoll about bars. It's in one of his books. I think it was in the one that we used in small groups, how the fellow said he'd rather go into a bar because in a bar he met people who were helpful and who listened and all the rest of it. And I think sometimes that when you write things like that or say things like that, you don't forget people in the bar have nothing to measure up to. No standard, nothing to hold up. They all know they're all in the pits, and they can all share from the pits. The Christian has a problem. His problem is the standard of the Lord Jesus Christ. He knows he's not going to arrive at it. But he also knows there is a standard. Now, how do you deal with that in your head? Well, it sometimes causes problems to believers. How to accept somebody who is caught by a sin and not let go of the standard that we know is right. It's a problem. It's not so simple. You run into that with your children when you raise them. You know that this is what you want them to do, and you can understand why they did what they did. And how do you direct them to do what is right, correct them, deal with it, and at the same time not lose their fellowship? And it poses you a problem. Not very hard if it's somebody else's kid, but it is hard if it's yours. And you run into that. So here is a problem within the Word of God. We've got to learn to deal with. The key is somewhere in there. So I'll give you a homework assignment. Go home and find the key that solves this little riddle of chronology. It is a riddle, and it is there. Some of the commentators don't mention it, some of them do. And there are other possibilities. Okay, Daniel 10. Now we'll start with the chapter. When an actor walks out on the stage to perform, Shakespeare, modern play, there's one running out at Chanhassen called I Do, I Do. It's an excellent little play. If you happen to like legitimate theater type of thing, and if the play is a good little play. I think it's been running almost as long as we've been in the Twin Cities. How many thousands of performances that they put on? It's just incredible. But when the actor walks out on the stage, everybody's attention focuses on that actor, doesn't it? What else is going on? What else is happening while the actor's out on the stage? Tell me some things. What kind of things are behind the scenes? There's a sound man. There's a lighting person doing some lighting. What else? There's a director. Costume changes, some of them being prepared in the back. Okay, what else? Set changes. Some more. Orchestra going on. Anything else that you can think of? Somebody's gone. You can tell somebody who's been in the usher force for a long time. Sound effects. What else? Baki's in the booth. Everything he said has had to do with sound so far. Charles is an usher. He's counting the money. And, okay, something else. What else might be going on? Huh? Makeup? Now you're away from sound. Right. Prompter? The prompter is the guy that maybe has a little spot down below where he can just be heard or seen by the people on the stage. All these things are going on. The people in the audience pay absolutely no attention to the prompter. Most of the time we are not even aware that he is there. We are aware that the set changes. But if we are very much aware of the people changing the set, we would walk away from the theater afterwards, and what would our comment be? Very poorly done. We want the sets changed, but we want them changed in such a way that it's just not a very visible thing. What you are going to see in Daniel 10 is that Daniel's on the stage, and man is on the stage, and nations are on the stage, and everybody's watching them. But behind the scene, there are some things going on, and if you really want to put a title on the 10th chapter, I think you can call it Behind the Scenes, which is what I chose to call it in our book, Behind the Scenes. Some of the things that are going on. Man likes to think of himself as in control of his destiny, in control of his environment, in control of his history. Look at Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 23. Jeremiah 10, 23. This is a verse that hurts when we read it, that we want to rebel against, but it is true. Jeremiah 10, 23. Here is a man with a healthy view of God. He says, I know, O Lord, that a man's way is not in himself, nor does it lie in man, nor is it in man who walks to direct his steps. Isn't that a marvelous statement of the sovereignty of God? Next verse. Correct me, Lord, but with justice. Not with anger, because if you got angry at me, you would literally destroy me. And we are not going to go on any further than that. Man really can control very, very little. The day I was working on this set of notes, the news came on, and our temperature here was 5 degrees warmer than it was in Phoenix. And that was after a number of our people had gone out to Phoenix to get away from the cold. It was 5 degrees warmer here, the sun was shining, and it was snowing in Phoenix for the first time in years. Now that was an exception. But I remember that Sunday because Sunday morning there were at least half a dozen people that were talking about the fact that it was warmer here that day than it was in Phoenix. Because Phoenix is on our mind, so many of our folk are out there. So it was called to our attention. We think we can control things, but we cannot. We eliminate one illness. For example, polio. We thought we had that pretty well licked. And we get proud of ourselves. We licked smallpox. We licked yellow fever. And we've developed herpes and AIDS and forms of cancer that were never heard of before. So we lick one and another one comes along, right? We just don't seem to win. One kind of flu, a vaccine is developed for, we vaccinate it away, and along comes the next type of flu, for which the vaccine is absolutely useless. And we have these bouts of flu regularly. There was Asian flu and Hong Kong flu and type B flu and some other flu, and there will be another one. It just seems like every time we think we have arrived someplace, we find out we have not arrived there quite so thoroughly as we thought. A heathen king got to feeling proud of himself in the 4th chapter of Daniel and needed a bit of humbling, and God saw to it that that heathen king was humbled. And in verse 26, that heathen king makes a pronouncement. Or the prophet makes a pronouncement to the king. In that it was commanded to leave the stump with the roots of the tree, your kingdom will be assured to you after you recognize that it is what? Heaven that rules. Then you go to verse 28, and all of that happened. Everything Daniel said. Nebuchadnezzar was driven out of his house. His kingdom was held in abeyance for that period of time. Verse 37, now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, exalt, and honor the King of heaven, For all his works are true and his ways just, and he is able to humble those who walk in pride. Nebuchadnezzar learned in that speech from 34 through 37 that indeed it is heaven that rules over the earth. Nebuchadnezzar learned it. Now Daniel is going to be instructed. Daniel personally is going to be instructed as to how involved all of that is. Paul learned it. Paul wrote to the Ephesians in Ephesians chapter 6, and he said, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, spiritual wickedness in the heavenlies. Paul knew what he was wrestling against. He wrote to the Corinthians. And the Corinthians had focused in on these people who were cultists. And Paul said to them, look, the cultist comes disguised as a good person because Satan clothes his servants as if they were ministers of light. He's a master of disguise. But the cultist is still the servant of Satan. Sometime when you're witnessing to the Lord, somebody has Bible come up and say something. I've had this happen to me, so I know it's sick. Said to me one time, I don't want to be a Christian because if I become a Christian, that means I have to bow before Christ and I have to become his servant and I will be nobody's servant. You know what's wrong with that? According to Romans 6, if you're not serving Christ, you already are a slave, and you're a slave of sin, Satan. Now, which master would you rather be the servant of? Christ or Satan? That's the choice. The choice is not between freedom and servitude. The choice is between service to Satan or service to Christ. One who is beneficent and one who is destructive. And a lot of people don't seem to realize the things that people are caught into. Now, let's go on a little bit more. This vision is kind of unique. Right? It's a unique vision because it's the only one recorded about the time of Cyrus. It is a unique vision because it's not recorded. If you read the 10th chapter of Daniel, you will discover that this dream or vision that Daniel got is not recorded. Now the closest thing to it might be verse 5. I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, there was a certain man dressed in linen. But look at the description of the vision in verse 1. The message was true and one of great conflict. Is there any conflict in the description of that messenger? No. The vision is not there. The vision is unique for another reason. Daniel says he understood the message and he had an understanding of the vision. Now, when he says he understood the message, that is, he grasped the content. And when it says he understood the vision, he grasped the symbology. He didn't know about the ram. He didn't know about the goat. That was chapter 8, right? Didn't know about them. So he prayed and asked God to explain it. If he didn't understand a vision, he asked God to explain it. But this one, whatever it was, Daniel saw it. He grasped the message. He understood the symbology. It's nowhere recorded. So you got a totally different kind of thing here than what we've had otherwise. Okay? In those days, I, Daniel, had been mourning for 3 entire weeks. Now, the word mourning is an intense word. It is a word that involves fasting. It is a word that involves no special care of himself. The time that he decided to do this, if you count backwards, he's on the first month of the year, right? He ends it on the 24th day. He's fasting and so on for 21 days. That means he started it on day right after a big celebration that we would call New Year's. Now the Jewish year begins with a celebration. They had a celebration. It was a regular feast. He didn't start then. He started right after the feast for the next 21 days of that year. And he has this mourning period, almost like someone who is mourning for the dead. I rather think when he writes and says about this great conflict or this great tribulation, that what has happened, and I'm speculating a little, and I hope you'll let me do that, I think Daniel's vision is so clear to him that he catches what's going to happen to the people of Israel. Paul starts out Romans 9, and he comes back to it again in Romans 10, saying, my heart's desire and my prayer to God is for Israel, that they might be saved. Paul knew that every step he took was literally driving another nail in the coffin of Israel. So he says, I wish that I could be cut off for the sake of my brothers. He knew what was happening. And he knew God was closing the door to the Jew and opening the door to the Gentile. And he knew what that meant. And his human desire was to change it. Not his desire in the Lord, but his human desire as a man. The Lord Jesus Christ wept. When did he weep? When did he lament? Tomb of Lazarus. He wept in the garden. He also took a look at the city of Jerusalem and cried over the city of Jerusalem. The city of Jerusalem was so far from God that brought the Lord Jesus Christ, and he knew how soon it was going to be destroyed. That before very long, the temple that he had been walking in, those courts, would be torn down by the Roman army, and that they wouldn't be rebuilt. He knew it. The Jews outside of the land of Palestine, every time they celebrate the Passover, they celebrate it with these words. This year here, next year in Jerusalem. That's been their watchword for centuries. This year here, next year Jerusalem, because they want the Messiah to come. But Jerusalem is such a thing to them. What's the subject of the book of Lamentations? What is the book of Lamentations?
Jeremiah is the mention of the back of Jerusalem was Israel and carried away to Babylon.
Not only Jeremiah's, but also who else's? John's. Read that book. Read that book and hear the heart cry of God and Jeremiah as they look at the city of Jerusalem and the ruin and emptiness. When God wanted to make Jerusalem the literal capital of the whole world. He wanted to put the people of Israel in that kind of a position. Here they are now having to be carried off into captivity because of their sin and their idolatry and all the rest of it. And the city is a shambles and a mess, and God is crying over it, and Jeremiah is crying over it, and the Lord cries over it, and Paul's heart aches for the city of Jerusalem, and Zechariah gets a vision of what's going to happen in the tribulation, and he discovers in 13:8, I believe is the reference, that 1/3 of Israel is all that's going to come out of that period. How many Jews are there in the world today? Yes. Pick a number. 10 million? How many? 85 million? You might be a little high. You're very generous. You come down a few. Let's take Jim's 10, just for the sake of argument. 10 million Jews alive today. Tribulation starts today. 7 years later, over here. John, how many are left? 1/3 of it. 3.3. Somewhere between over there and over here, we have lost 6.7 million Jews. And if you were Daniel, and you got a glimpse of that, what would you do? That's what he did. He broke down and he mourned. And he wept. And he did it for a long period of time. For 21 days. No meat, no wine, no special preparations, no Sabbath day specials, nothing like that. Verse 2. 21 days this went on. Verse 4. On the 24th day of the first month, while I was by the bank of the great river, that is the Tigris, I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, there was a certain man dressed in linen. Now, he's off on a private retreat at the bank of the river. You know, Daniel was a unique man. Daniel saw some things that others didn't. You remember the story of Elisha and Gehazi in 2 Kings 6? The city of Damascus is surrounded by Samaria. The city of Samaria is surrounded by the army of the Syrians. And Gehazi and Elisha are walking along the wall looking at it, and looks hopeless. The Syrians are out there, they're well armed, they've got food, the Israelites are starving, they're in bad shape. And Gehazi looks at Jeremiah, at Elisha, and he says to him, Master, why doesn't God do something? Why doesn't something happen? Why don't we give up? It's absolutely beat. So Elisha looks at him and he says, Gehazi, It is not hopeless. Those who are with us are more than those who are out there. Now, if you were Gehazi, how would you have felt, Lloyd? He slipped a little that day, huh? Fell on his head. Couldn't count very well. But there was something that he could see that Gehazi couldn't. What did Elisha see? Huh? God's hand. What did he see? Angels. How many? What did he see? It's a little more than that in the scripture. A whole army, thousands of them, on the other hillside, and the chariots of God were there. Now Elisha looked at her and he said, God is going to win this battle. They're all out there. Our help is there. Then he says, okay, Lord, I want Lloyd's eyes opened up. And Gehazi's eyes are open. It's really he that sees it. Thousands of the chariots of the Lord. Daniel is here. He lifts up his eyes and he sees this messenger standing there. And he's described. He's dressed in linen and so on. We'll come back to that. Verse 7. I, Daniel, alone saw thee. Nobody else saw him. He had a whole bunch of Gehazis with him. Who were they? I don't know. Maybe the people who worked under him. Maybe his household servants. Maybe another group of prophets. But nobody except Daniel saw this vision at all. The only one that saw it. Nevertheless, something happened to them. For some reason or other, they became very, very... No explanation. They suddenly were afraid. Like the fur rising on the back of a dog. You can't see a reason why. Their fur rose. They didn't know what they were afraid of, but they were afraid. Because they didn't see anything. They ran away to hide. What did they run away from?
Great quaking.
Earthquake.
Great quaking.
The old ground show.
Yeah.
Great quaking.
All of a sudden, they had something to run from. But they saw nothing. Remember another incident like that? Remember another incident like that? This is not Paul in prison? Okay? Got the right man, but not the incident I was thinking about. Think of another. His conversion. His conversion, he describes it to the king. He says, those that were with me, they heard this noise, but they couldn't understand it. They didn't see, I saw a great light, they didn't see anything, they heard a noise, but they couldn't sort it out. The only one that could hear the words was Paul. The only one that could see the man was Daniel. The only one that could see the chariots was Elisha, until Gehazi's eyes were open. Little lesson. God's people can look at life differently because they see something different than the world sees. The world looks at life, it doesn't see the hand of God. Only the believer looks at it and sees the hand of God. You come through something and you look back on it later on and you see how things worked out, how everything fit together. What do you say, John? Thank God. What else might you say, John? Piece by piece, what happened? Right? Who was putting the puzzle together? God led me all the way. Ever hear people say that? God led me every step of the way. God led me. But all the while they're walking through it, they've got to puzzle out each step, don't they? When you're all done, you look back and you say, boy, didn't God work that out slick? Everything fit together, even if I didn't understand why or how at the time. Now it all fits together. What does the world say when they get all done and everything fit together? What does the world say? What's their word? Huh? Lucky. Okay, that's a good one. Another one. Coincidence. Okay? The Christian says, God. The world says, luck. Same thing here. Daniel sees something and nobody else sees it. Now, what does he see? He sees a messenger of some kind, a man. A prince. Let's read the description, verse 5. I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, there was a certain man dressed in linen, whose waist was girded with a belt of pure gold of Uphaz. Now there are two words that come from different languages, and the speculation is they're the same. They're this one here And then sometimes you'll see it like this. The gold of Ophir. If you look in a concordance, you will find references to gold at both of these places. The problem is it come out of two different languages. One of them doesn't have a Z and the other doesn't have an R. So how do you get from one language like that to another? Now, for example, here's the Greek word for angel. Okay? This is an A. These are gammas, or we would call them G's. E-L-O-S. How would you pronounce A-G-G-E-L-O-S? English now. How would you pronounce it if you saw it in English? Agulus? Agulus? But in Greek, because these two letters work together, it becomes NG. So we get now angelos. We drop off the ending, and what have I got now? That's our English word. Okay? See how things change when they go from one language to another? If you were in California and you had, whoops, I better put them in English. You had two letters together like that, how would you pronounce it in California? As a Y, but it's two L's. Because the language that that's written in is what? Spanish. Years ago, we were not too particular about carrying over national origins of names. So we would pronounce towns in a certain way. And then we became conscious that some people have Spanish heritage, and it's just as nice to pronounce the Spanish names in a Spanish way as it is to pronounce Swedish names in a Swedish way. And we've begun to change pronunciation of some of those towns so that now they are very, very conscious of the Spanish pronunciation. Go to California now, you better learn how to say the words right, or you are instantly marked as a non-Californian because you have said them improperly. In Portuguese, this is my name. If I was in Bolivia, it would be pronounced like this. Roger. Okay? If I am in Brazil, it is pronounced like this. Because a front R in Portuguese is always pronounced like an H. And a middle G in Spanish is always pronounced like an H. See? So I'm Roger here, Roger in Bolivia, and Roger in Brazil. Just languages. That's what you got here. Okay? So those are the same. We're going to come back to this description of this person in a little while. Let's read the rest of it. His body was like beryl. His face had the appearance of lightning. His eyes were like flaming torches. His arms and feet like the gleam of polished bronze. And the sound of his words like the sound of a tumult. Sound of his words like a lot of people making noise. I wish you could have heard the Grace Bible College gymnasium the other night. We were there for a basketball game against Northland Baptist College from Dunbar, Wisconsin. And it came down to the end of the game, and at the 3 or 4 seconds before the final gun went off, one of the GBC guys sunk a basket that tied the game. Went into overtime. And the stands just went wild. Everybody was talking. Everybody was hollering directions. Everyone was telling a team what to go. Everyone was yelling. That's the way it sounded as one being spoke, like there was a great multitude of people being orchestrated together. Okay? So Daniel said, I alone saw the vision. The men who were with me did not see the vision. Nevertheless, a great dread fell on them. They ran away to hide themselves. And actually what it says in the Hebrew is, as they were running away, they began hiding themselves. They took off to run and then decided running isn't prudent. We can't get away. We better find a place to hide. That's the process that they had. So I was left alone and saw this great vision, yet no strength was left in me, for my natural color turned to a deathly pallor, and I retained no strength. But I heard the sound of his words, and as soon as I heard the sound of his words, I fell into a trance, into a deep sleep on my face, with my face to the ground. Now, who was this? Big debate. If you know the book of Revelation, the first chapter, there's a beautiful description of the Lord Jesus Christ in Revelation 1. Sounds almost like it. But verse 13 poses a problem. What's the problem in verse 13? Michael came to help him. Still, we got more. What else have we got as a problem? If this is the Lord, what's the problem?
The prince of the kingdom of Persia was stood.
If it was the Lord, you wouldn't assume that Michael would come to help the Lord because the prince of Persia's got a standoff. If it was Michael with the standoff, you would assume the Lord came to help. So if this person needs help from an angel, in order to win a battle over an angel, what do you suspect he is? Lower. Maybe an angel. Maybe it's Gabriel. You know, some people say it doesn't fit Gabriel because the other description of Gabriel in the book of Daniel is a little bit different. Did I have the same suit on this morning? No. Didn't have the same suit on this morning. If somebody described me this morning, they would have described me in a gray suit with a red tie. Shirt was the same, with a gray suit, striped suit, and a red tie. If somebody described me tonight, they would describe me in a brown suit with a paisley tie that leans on browns and blues, with a little bit of a lighter color in it, huh? But it's the same me, I'm just appearing a little bit differently. Maybe if they saw me this evening and I had shaved, they would say, no, he really does look different. You know, because you can change appearance very greatly. I don't think that's a big problem. But there is a big problem if it's the Lord, because suddenly you have the Lord unable to defeat an angel, and that poses to me a very large problem. Now, just to show you how the scholars are divided, John Walberg, who is the president of Dallas Theological Seminary, a very good scholar, says it's the Lord. But he hastens on to say, if it is the Lord, as I contend, then in verse 10, it's got to be another angel. It's got to be someone else. The trouble is, that preposition in verse 11 says he. Verse 9 is his. Verse 6 is his words. There's no place in there that inserts a new person. You're interacting with the same two people. But Walbert recognizes that if the vision is the Lord, then the person speaking in 10 and 11 and beyond that has to be someone else. But he introduces this person into the text. The text doesn't show another person introduced. So my assumption is that it is not the Lord. It is indeed an angel, possibly Gabriel, possibly another angel. Because Gabriel is a messenger of the Lord doesn't mean he is the only messenger of the Lord. He just happens to be one that's used relatively often with the people of Israel. Now, the word prince occurs in here. Let's start with 10. A hand touched me, and he sent me trembling on my hands and knees. He said to me, O Daniel, man of high esteem, understand the words that I'm about to tell you. Stand upright, for I have been sent to you. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood upright. He said, Do not be afraid, Daniel, for from the first day you set your heart on understanding this, and on humbling yourself before your God. Your words were heard, and I have come in response to your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia was withstanding me for these 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came. The word prince in the book of Daniel occurs 18 times. In the first 6 chapters, it occurs 7. All of them are used in the sense of a prince human of a human kingdom, like the princes of Babylon. But when you get into the 7th chapter, the word prince now begins to change. It is used more frequently in the latter portion of the book, and more often to refer to an angelic being, a power behind the throne. Now, you've got to see throughout the book of Daniel how this occurs. Chapter 10, verse 13, you have the prince of Persia. Chapter 10, verse... I've got 2, but it must be further on. 12? Where's the prince of Greece? I've got a typographical thing here. 20? Yes. Okay, that's a good typo. Usually you find that one. There's a typographical error in the first full chapter on page 17. It should be on about the 6th line down, and that it starts with a 10-2. It should be 10-20. Okay? It should be 10-20. After Prince of Greece. On page 17, about the 6th line down, is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th line down. Starts with a 10-20 in brackets. A 10-2. It should be 10-20.
Second paragraph from the top?
Yeah, the first full paragraph.
10-2 should be 10-20?
Should be 10-20. Just a typo. Now look at some of those other princes. 11:22, the Prince of the Covenant. 12:1, the Prince of Israel. 8:25, the Prince of Princes. 9:26, the Prince to come. Not just talking about earthly beings, he's talking about angels on the march. Now that's where I'm coming from with my original thing about the guy on the stage. Daniel's the guy on the stage. See? Cyrus is the guy on the stage. Darius is the guy on the stage. Who's moving the scenery? That prince. Okay? Now, here Daniel gets on his knees and he prays. He says, God, I want to know about this. He starts praying and an angel comes to him. And the angel says, I was on my way from day number 1. Daniel, the first day you prayed, your prayer was heard. From day number 1, the answer was on the way. How many days did it take to get there? 21. Whose fault was it that he had to wait 21 days? Was it Daniel's fault? He didn't pray hard enough, right? His heart wasn't right before God. Something's wrong with Daniel. That's what most people contend. In this case, there's nothing wrong with Daniel. The problem is that the answer is being brought by this angelic messenger, who on his way is stopped by another angelic messenger. And they're pretty much evened up. See? Now verse 13. The prince of the kingdom of Persia was withstanding me. We were wrestling 21 days. I was getting nowhere. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, according to chapter 12, the one that stands for Israel, came to help me. Now the next statement is hard, because the New American Standard says, for I have been left there with the kings of Persia. What does King James say?
I remained there with the king of Persia.
Okay. The Hebrew more literally says, I became superfluous for the kings of Persia. Michael was there. Michael took over the battle. Michael was capable of fighting this other angel. Now I was the odd man out, so I was free to come and do what I was sent to do in the first place. He left the battle to Michael, and he comes to Daniel. Okay? That's what he's saying. There are some interesting things that are involved in his touching. 3 times Daniel is touched by this messenger. Verse 10. A hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. He started out prone on the ground, lying on his face. And the angel hand touches him and brings him up to his knees. There are many, many times when people who are down want to get on their feet before they get on their good lesson in it. On the way up, you stop on your knees. And after you spend time on your knees, then the messenger says, now, Daniel, stand up. Get up, Daniel. But he has to stop on his knees. Second touch is in verse 16. Behold, one who resembled a human being was touching my lips, and I opened my mouth and spoke. The next time he was touched, he was able to speak. The third time is in verse 18. This one with a human appearance touched me again, and I became strong. From his face to his knees, from standing erect to speaking to strong. The touch that God put into the life of Daniel through the hand of the angelic messenger. Have you ever felt like you're standing alone? You know, sometimes a Christian in a shop, you can feel awfully alone. A Christian in an office, a Christian in a hospital, a Christian in a school. You can feel like there isn't another Christian anywhere around, can't you? Sometimes it gets bad. Sometimes, if you're a little bit different theologically, you can get to feeling sorry for yourself, like you stand alone. You know, everybody else is different. And this isn't... Look at this angel.